All right, you can open to Revelation chapter 8. Revelation chapter 8. Revelation chapter 8. And for those of you watching at home, we're supposed to have load shedding in just a minute or two. Power might go off, so if you see a break in the live stream, we're going to get it restarted just now by the grace of God. Revelation 8 tonight. Before we start, let's go to the Lord in prayer. Father, we thank you today for what you've already given us, and we have a lot to think about. Lord, we appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight and open the book and be fed once again. We pray that your Spirit would guide us into all truth. Lord, we're looking into the glass darkly tonight. This is all prophetic stuff. I pray that you please help us to handle it smartly. And Lord, let it, at the end of the day, motivate us to reach others so that they don't have to personally experience this. Help us, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. All right, the chapter outline, very simple. 2 parts, verses 1 to 5. We're going to look at the heavenly altar of incense. And then verses 6 to 13, we'll talk about the 4 trumpets. Now, there are 7 trumpets altogether, but 4 of them are mentioned in chapter 8. And we'll explain chapters 9 and the outline in just a moment. Revelation 8 and verse 1, it says, "When he had opened the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven about the space of half an hour." Some preachers have said this is the evidence, this is the proof text that there are no women in heaven. And obviously they're begging for trouble when they go down that path, right? So I'm not going to go down that path. Just thought I'd throw that out there. Food for thought, food for thought, or for a fight, one or the other. But in all seriousness, let me give you a quick review. We've talked about the seals now already. So first through the 6th seal, remember the 5th seal is a worldwide persecution that goes on unto the end. And remember, they pray. Now this is important to remember. Matter of fact, I want you to see the verse, chapter 6 and verse 10. They're praying this, and it will directly affect what we have in chapter 8. They cried with a loud voice, these are the martyrs, saying, "How long, O Lord, holy and true, dost thou not judge and avenge our blood on them that dwell on the earth?" So that's the question they pose to the Lord. How much longer do we have to wait for justice? That is the cry of the innocent blood since Abel. When are we going to get ultimate and final justice? God, when do you rain down a proper and just punishment? Verse 11, "White robes were given unto every one of them, and it was said unto them, they should rest yet for a little season, until their fellow servants also and their brethren that should be killed as they were should be fulfilled." So rest a little while. So that's where my dotted line has come in. This is the little while. By the 6th seal, now you have the second coming of Christ, and now you're going to see ultimate final justice poured out. Right? There's still a judgment to come, but now you see God rising up and answering this cry for justice. When we get to chapter 8 and verse 1, remember chapter 7 was what we call a parenthetical chapter. And I'm going to show you a couple of verses tonight. We'll compare a couple of verses that'll kind of bring that out, make that obvious that it's a parenthetical chapter. God's just filling in some information that would help us understand what's going on. But now we have the 7th seal. So God does this all the time. We do it all the time. When we tell a story, right? We're telling the story, this happened, then this happened, then this happened. We get to this thing, and we go, yeah, we get sidetracked, And we start, yeah, let me tell you more about that, because maybe you don't understand what this is. So I give you all these other details, and it carries me forward, right? This detail carries me forward, and then I go, now where was I? You ever said that? Now, where was I? And we go back to, oh yeah, I was right here, and then I continue the story. So the story kind of trails off this way, then I come back to where I was and keep going down the timeline. I believe that's what God is doing with these seals. He's gone down, seal 5 all the way to here, seal 6, obviously the second coming of Christ. And then he says, now where was I? He gives us a parenthetical, right? He goes, okay, now I've told you about the 144,000. I don't want you to think that I don't have any of my servants on the earth in this time. I will go to the Jew first. This is God's plan, Jew first, then to the Gentile. So in the tribulation, he seals 144,000. Jewish evangelists, and sends them out to get the rest of the world. Right? So Jew first, then go to the Gentile. So he gives us that parenthetical. He goes, now where was I? Oh yes, back to the story. And the seventh seal opens, and it is an interlude, right? It's a brief intermission. God says, let's take a break. Everybody catch your breath. I've given you a lot to think about. And again, we do this. God does this in the Bible. We're going to see it a few other times in the book of Revelation. Take a break. Even heaven, right? All of heaven is silent for half an hour. So they're catching their breath. This seventh seal opens to the trumpets. It is a seal of silence. It is God's way of catching your attention. Watch how this works. See, I've had several of you look, your heads lifted up from your nose going, what? That's what silence does. It makes you look and go, what happened? Yeah. Is Pastor Mike experiencing load shedding? I am experiencing jet lag, but that's not the same as load shedding, right? So now think of this. This is just a practical thought. When's the last time heaven was quiet? Ever since God created the spiritual beings that are in heaven with him, angels, cherubim, seraphim, what do? They cry day and night, holy, holy, holy. Okay, we're back up and running. Honey, if you don't mind, just checking on your phone to see if it's the same.
We need to load the first time. I'll try.
Okay. All right, so as I was saying, ever since there have been spiritual beings in heaven, they've been crying out and praising the Lord, worshiping God. Now, for 30 minutes, they just stay silent. That is attention grabbing. So what comes next, I can only imagine, must be quite serious. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is Ernstach, as you let's say. This is a big deal, whatever's about to happen. Verse 2, and I saw the 7 angels which stood before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets. These 7 trumpets are going to be various plagues. We're going to see that word used later. We could also say judgments, curses, whatever word you might want to put on that. These 7 angels obviously represent, or let's say they are 7 specially chosen angels for this particular matter. And we briefly read about some of them in chapter 7. Let me bring you back to that. Look at chapter 7, verse 2. It says, and I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living God, and he cried with a loud voice to the 4 angels to whom it was given to hurt the earth and the sea. And then they have this special instruction, hurt not the earth, neither the sea nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of God in their foreheads. So the 4 angels in chapter 7, we read about them in chapter 8. Now, in chapter 8, you say, but it says 7 trumpets, 7 angels. Yes, but in chapter 8, only 4 of them sound. And when those 4 trumpets are blown, the earth and the seas are directly affected. Humanity is indirectly affected. Men will die from this, but the plagues do not come directly on them. It hurts the earth and the seas. The last 3 trumpets directly go against mankind. And the earth and the seas will be indirectly affected, you see. So that's why there's a distinction, a division, if you will, between the 4 angels that have power to hurt the earth and the sea. That's chapter 8. The other 3, that's chapter 9 and chapter 11. All right, so chapter 8 again in verse 3. And another angel came and stood at the altar. By the way, if I can just tie this up, that's your parentheses. Right? When I mentioned the parenthetical, this shows us that what we're reading in chapter 7 is happening in the midst of chapter 8. So that it just kind of fills in that information. If we didn't have chapter 7, chapter 8, verse 2 and 3, it may not make as much sense to us. So it helps us understand it better. Verse 3, and another angel came and stood at the altar, having a golden censer. That's like a bowl, if you will. And there was given unto him much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of all saints upon the golden altar which was before the throne. All right, now this golden altar, in the Old Testament, this would answer to the altar of incense. As you walk into the holy place, on your right-hand side, you would have the table of showbread. On the left-hand side, the candlestick. And then right in front of you, you'd have the altar of incense. And you'd have to have some incense going up if you wanted to enter into the curtain or the veil behind that, which would then allow you into the holiest of all, or the Holy of Holies. That's where the Ark of the Covenant would be. That answers to the throne of God in heaven. So before you can reach the innermost sanctum, the presence of God, you have to step past this altar of incense. It is an outstanding picture of prayer. the altar of incense itself. I'm talking Exodus 30, where Moses was commanded to make it. Go through that chapter sometime, get you a sermon together on prayer, because that thing will preach. It'll go a while. Now, even biblically, the connection between incense and burning the incense before the Lord and prayer, that connection is confirmed. That's not just a preacher thing. Take your Bible, come to Psalm 142. Psalm 142, or 141, I'm sorry, verse 2. (141) and verse 2. Now, if you're a bit warm, I'm not turning on the AC because the manager here on the property said that it affects the generator. So just so you know, I forgive. Most of you are probably happy with that decision, but I'm going to sweat a little bit for it. Psalm 141, let's get verses 1 and 2. Lord, I cry unto thee, make haste unto me, give ear unto my voice, when I cry unto thee. Let my prayer be set forth before thee as what? Incense. And the lifting up of my hands, there's prayer, as the evening sacrifice. So you can see the connection between prayer and incense. This is a biblical thought. Now, also what you should see here is David is praying and saying, God, let my prayer be acceptable. Do you see that from verse 1 and 2? Yeah. Give ear when I cry. So don't turn me away. Please, God, hear me out. And I believe this ties into what we have in Revelation 8. The innocents that have been killed, they have been praying for centuries, for millennia. God, how long wilt thou not judge the people that have done this to us? God, will you not accept our prayer, our plea for justice? And now I believe Revelation 8 verse 3, when the incense is added to the altar, this is God's way of saying all those prayers. The incense is proof, that sweet smelling savor. God says, I accept every single one of those prayers. Every wrong will be made right. So I think that's the connection why there's incense used with that. Chapter 8 verse 4 now. Revelation 8 verse 4. He says, and the smoke of the incense which came with the prayers of the saints ascended up before God out of the angel's hand. And the angel took the censer and filled it with fire of the altar. So I'm going to say this, he's taking some coals off of that altar, putting it in the censer. So he's poured the incense on the altar, up the smoke goes, and then now the bowl is empty. He puts the coals of fire in there and cast it into the earth. He's just showing this is the direction, this is the aim of God's wrath. That God is now taking aim at the earth, and He is going to answer those prayers by bringing down judgments. And there were voices and thunderings and lightnings and an earthquake. Now this often happens. This is not the first time we've read this in Revelation. We're going to read it a couple of other times as we go through. Anytime God is about to manifest His power, heaven gets excited. Nature even begins to tremble, right? This is earthquake. Wow. So the thunders, the lightnings are going off, and this is God flexing. You know, when an athlete, I think most of us in the room, you've watched a sporting event at some point, and when an athlete does some great move, you know, his famous move, the crowd, oh, and we all get excited, and people start to clap, and it gets loud. Yeah. Have you ever been in a stadium when everybody's cheering at the same time? That thing starts to rumble. Yeah. Rumble. That's us in a stadium for a puny little man going, boom, with a, you know, kick the ball well, or through the... Imagine God saying, no, check this out. Watch what I'm about to do, and nature just says, oh man, okay, brace yourselves, right? Yeah. Now, before we move on, we've looked at the first part here, the heavenly altar. God is the whole idea here is, guys, I've heard your complaint. It's legit. The earth deserves to be punished, the people of the earth. Now remember that the blood of the innocents that has been shed, where does that blood go? It goes into the ground. Abel, his blood cries from the ground. The land, right, where that innocent blood is shed, that land cannot be cleansed but by the blood of him that shed it. So the only way to cleanse it is to punish the earth. Now God did this once with Noah flooding the whole thing, right? The earth, not only the people, but the earth was destroyed as well. Nature took a knock. And now nature's going to get it again, right? This is all just part of the curse. But that innocent blood has been soaked into the ground. So God says, that's where I'm going to aim my wrath. Now, God is dealing with the issue of justice, and this is a big deal. If you don't think that it is, just wait till somebody cheats you. And that is one of the hardest things to overcome, when you know I did nothing wrong, and yet I got treated badly. Now, this can't be right, and people can get extremely bitter for the rest of their lives, and it can ruin their life. Because all they think about is getting revenge. Right? That's all they can, and it consumes them. Being able to take that injustice that happened to you, put it on the altar of incense before the Lord and say, God, as long as you need to take to fix this, to make it right, I'll trust you to do it. Wow. Vengeance belongs to you, not to me. You'll repay, not me. That is not easy, but that's why there's a huge concentration on that in Scripture. Because at some point in your life, somebody's going to treat you wrong and you won't deserve it. Right? So let me show you a passage that I think goes with this. Chapter 8, verses 1 to 5. Come to Psalm 46, famous verse. You all know this. But I dare say very few people are familiar with the context of this verse. 46, Psalm 46, verse 10. This will be your attendance code for tonight. Psalm 46 and verse 10. You might have a coffee cup that bears this verse. Maybe a bumper sticker or something. All right, 46:10. Be still and know that I am God. Right? Good verse, isn't it? Yeah. And it is. I mean, it's a great verse. Keep it on your coffee cup. I have it hanging somewhere in my house. It's a great verse. Be still and know that I'm God. So when we read that, we think of our quiet time, sitting in a quiet room and opening your Bible and just thinking, meditating on the Lord. I'm all for that. Check out the context. I'm just going to read quickly. Let your eyes move quickly with me. Verse 1. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in what? Trouble. Trouble. Kind of like tribulation. Same word. Verse 2. Therefore will not we fear, though the earth be removed. There's your earthquakes. And though the mountains be carried into the midst of the sea. Though the waters thereof roar and be troubled, though the mountains shake with the swelling thereof, Selah. Verse 4, there is a river, the streams whereof maketh glad the city of God, the holy place of the tabernacles of the Most High. God is in the midst of her. She shall not be moved. God shall help her, and that right early. The heathen raged, and the kingdoms were moved. He uttered his voice, the earth melted. When do you think that's going to happen? The heathen raging, kingdoms, nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom. This is a tribulation passage. And verse 7, he says, the Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge, Selah. This is Israel crying out to God in the middle of the tribulation. You are our refuge in trouble. God, please, these people are persecuting us. The Antichrist is trying to wipe us off the map. Help us. Verse 8, come, behold the works of the Lord, what desolations he hath made in the what? Come and look at how much God has destroyed in the earth. That's what they're saying. Where does this, what's the cross-reference? Revelation 8. We're going to read about it just now. Verse 9, he maketh wars to cease unto the end of the earth. He breaketh the bow. He breaketh the bow. Does that ring a bell with Revelation 6? The white horse rider has a bow and no arrows. Remember that? He breaketh the bow and cutteth the spear in sunder. He burneth the chariot in the fire. So God, this is now, we're dealing with this event over here. He makes wars to cease. He comes back to the earth and literally puts his foot down. Right? Verse 10, be still and know that I am God. After all that ruckus, he says, now, I've put my foot down. The Antichrist is finished. Israel's protected. The saints of God, we're there with him in the kingdom. He says, now, take a moment and look. You see what I've done? Be still and know. Now, there's a practical application, right? Your life can get pretty worked up, right? Things can get pretty rough. And then when God finally fixes it, take a step back and go, wow, look what he did. Brought me through some rough times. I will be exalted among the heathen. I will be exalted in the earth. There's your millennial kingdom. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge, Selah. I'm just going to put this in the back of your mind. Revelation 12. Okay, we're going to also read how Israel will run off into the wilderness. This is their prayer during that time. So let's come back to Revelation 8. Now let's look at these particular trumpet judgments. as I've been saying with my particular timeline, I do not claim to have the exact times mapped out. There might be a greater space between some of these. I have the trumpet way back here. Several commentaries will put the trumpet starting at the halfway point, right? So there's, and I admit, we're looking through the glass darkly. I don't pretend to have any inside knowledge on this, so please understand this. The dial could move on that a little. Verse 6, chapter 8, verse 6, and the 7 angels which had the 7 trumpets prepared themselves to sound. The first angel sounded, and there followed hail and fire mingled with blood, and they were cast upon the earth, and the third part of the trees was burnt up, and all green grass was burnt up. All right, hail and fire. Now you have a little bit of this in Exodus 9. You're going to see some overlap with the plagues in Egypt and the plagues or the judgments in the tribulation. You're going to see some similar things happening. But in Exodus 9, verse 23, hail comes down and fire runs upon the ground. I'm going to say that like lightning strikes and lights a fire, fire runs. This is slightly different, much more intense. Hail and fire. So a hailstorm with lightning, I think, would make sense. It could be fire bombs falling from heaven. It could be something different than lightning, so I'm going to leave some room for that. Hail and fire mingled with blood. I've scratched my head on that for a little bit this week. Mingled with blood. Where'd this blood come from? Now, most people will say, well, it just looks like blood. It's not really blood coming down. There is a thing. You can go on the internet and type in blood rain. And what happens is you get the red dust gets sucked up into the clouds, and then it comes down, and that water gets stained red, and it does look like pools of blood. I mean, when it hits the ground, it looks like it's raining blood. It's not blood, but it looks that way. So some people will say, well, that's what's happening here. It's a ferocious storm. There's hail involved, so probably blood rain. I don't know. Why not believe that it's blood? So where did God get this blood? How did he, I don't need a natural explanation to accept what he says here. I don't know how. I can't explain it through natural or human observation. He just says that blood is going to come down. Now, is it human blood? Is it animal blood? Is it some other kind of... I don't know. All I know is that's what it says. Now, I find it interesting, however, just hold your place here, get chapter 16 quickly. Of course, we'll look at this more when we get to it, but chapter 16 and verse 4. This is the vial judgments, but he says, the third angel poured out his vial upon the rivers, fountains of waters, and they became blood. I heard the angel of the waters say, Thou art righteous, O Lord, which art and wast and shalt be, because thou hast judged thus. For they have shed the blood of saints and prophets, here's your justice, and thou hast given them blood to drink, for they are worthy. They wanted blood, so you gave it to them. So in this case, right, humanity has been filling the earth, the land, with innocent blood. God says, oh, you guys want blood? I'll rain it all over you. And down it comes. So I see a connection in that. Now back in chapter 8, verse 7, a third part of the trees was burnt up. Now, I must admit, as we're going to get down to the next part, a third part of the sea becomes blood. There's a question here. Are we talking all of the oceans? Like a third of the whole, all the water on the planet? Or all this ocean water? Or are we talking the Mediterranean Sea? Right? So are we looking at a global thing or kind of a local thing? Well, by the time we get to chapter 13, we're going to read how the beast comes out of the sea, and that is the Mediterranean Sea. We'll see that context when we come to it. So there's a bit of a precedent for making it local, to say it's just the Mediterranean area. But it wouldn't surprise me if this is a global thing. And by the end of the chapter, I think you'll see why. We have the sun, the moon, and the stars going dark. ESCOM happens to them too. And because of that load shedding in the heavens, it makes me think this is a global event. Because sun, moon, and stars does not only affect the Mediterranean area. So that's my thinking on that. Now you have a third of the trees and all the green grass burns up. So this is an ecological problem. You know, isn't it strange? For a couple hundred years, the preachers were the ones saying, the end is coming, the end is nigh, the end is here, it's all coming to an end, we're all going to burn, everything's going up in flames. And then all the scientists would laugh and go, oh, you You nuts, you preacher nuts, come on, you Bible thumpers. It's not coming to an end. And now the scientists are going, oh, environmental problems, the glaciers, everything's melting, global warming, and it's all coming to an end. And the preacher's going, oh, you're nuts. Isn't it strange how that's flip-flopped all of a sudden? The science finally caught up with us. Yeah. We know that it's not glaciers melting and global warming and, cows passing gas. That's not the problem. That's what they say, Yeah. Cow emissions is the problem. That's not the problem. The problem is sin. Yeah. Like Brother Baruch told us this morning, right. The problem is sin. Yeah. And God judging it. All right, now the trees are burnt up and green grass. What are the animals going to do? You remember in chapter 6, the beast go a bit crazy. And the beasts start reaching out and killing people. Why? They have nothing to eat. The trees, those are nature's air filters. Right? They take the carbon dioxide, change it into oxygen so we can breathe. A third of them burned up. People are going to be asthmatics. You're gone. You're going to struggle to catch your breath. This is going to be now, I don't know how long the trees and the grass stay dead, right? Obviously, the earth is built so that it does correct itself. And I don't know how long it will take for that stuff to regrow and get back up and going again. But it's going to hit the earth hard. Now, verse 8, and the second angel sounded, and as it were a great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea. And the third part of the sea became blood, and the third part of the creatures which were in the sea and had life died, and the third part of the ships were destroyed. Now this is, I think, the safest guess for the great mountain burning with fire. That's a pretty good description of a meteorite, or an asteroid, if you will. So this massive chunk of rock comes down, hits the waters. This part, when we read about sea, this will be the salt waters. We're going to read about fresh water in just a moment. And a third part of the sea becomes blood. Now, does it become blood because the fish in the sea get affected and killed and their blood is filling? Maybe. That could be. Maybe, again, the blood that came down from the first trumpet, that raining down, maybe that has affected it as well to some extent. However it turns to blood, it affects the buoyancy. Right? So not only the meteorite hitting the water can sink a ship, but also that boat, that ship is not buoyant enough to float in blood. Right? It can do it in water, but not the thickness of the blood, the buoyancy of the boat, it just will go down. So a third part of the creatures which were in the sea and had life died. That might be the source of the blood. And the third part of the ships were destroyed. Now, when we think about the sea, this affects the weather. Right? The warmness of all of that, that's going to stir things up. I am not a scientist, I'm not a meteorologist, so I'm not fit to really explain how one domino, when it falls, will affect the next ecological thing, the next environmental issue will be kicked off. But this, can you imagine the smell? I don't know if you've ever been around it, a dead animal, and the blood's been out. It's not nice. That thing you let it sit for a few days and it stinks something horrible. The earth stinks. I mean, the world is just going to smell horrible. All right, so again, there's not much more to say to this. A lot of people, when they teach through Revelation, they'll read this, even pick up pretty much any commentary by a Reformed theologian. They don't believe that it's going to happen like it says. They will say this was actually the Gothic people invading Rome and destroying Rome. I dare you to find Goth and Rome in that verse. But I read the commentaries. I'm thinking, how do you get that? It's simple. You privately interpret it. You approach the book of Revelation thinking it cannot mean what it says. It has to be some symbolic language. And once you go down that path, you can make it fit whatever you want. So rather, as you know, I approach this in a very literal way. I believe it is prophetic because Revelation 1 says the words of this prophecy. So there you go. It's going to happen just like it says. I don't think we have anything in our prior knowledge to compare this to. Many of these events are going to be unprecedented. Blood raining down and a great mountain falling into the ocean. These are unprecedented events. Verse 10, and the third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp. So I'm going to say it probably looks like a comet, or is a comet. And it fell upon the third part of the rivers, and upon the fountains of waters. There's your fresh water. And the name of the star is called Wormwood. Almost as if God has been saving this star for this moment. Now, just if you want to make a note, Jeremiah chapter 9, verse 15, it talks about wormwood there. Wormwood is something that is on the earth now. It's something we know about. It's a very bitter substance. If you take too much of it, you can get very sick or even die. Right? So this star is thrown into the fresh water, the drinking water. It says at the end of verse 11, and the third part of the waters became wormwood. They become poisoned, if you will. And many men died of the waters because they were made bitter. So notice the water is directly affected, and then humanity is indirectly affected. So it's not like trees and grass burning up doesn't affect humanity. It certainly does, but secondarily. All right, so this is the fresh water now. These, just like the trees and the grass, can bounce back. I don't know how long it takes. I don't know how long the waters of the oceans stay blood. I don't know. By Revelation 16, God turns them to blood again, which tells me that when these trumpet judgments happen, it might be a year, it might be 6 months. I don't know how long the blood stays there, or how long the fresh water stays poisonous. I don't know. But it does bounce back eventually. And then God, of course, does some other things later on with it. So men now, they can't get a fresh drink of water. So they can't breathe right. It stinks horribly. Fire all over the place because hail and fire raining down. And now they can't get a drink of water. Yeah. Scared to turn the tap on. And this is a rough life. This is rough stuff. Verse 12, and the fourth angel sounded, and the third part of the sun was smitten, and the third part of the moon, and the third part of the stars. Now, I hesitate to say that, some people explain it that like the smoke of all this judgment, it rises up and darkens the light that is shining down. I get what they mean by that, but it says the sun was smitten. So it looks like God does something directly to the natural light sources for the earth, the sun, moon, and stars. They are smitten. I'm going to say that, forgive me, this might be a little juvenile, but I think it gets the job done. Have you ever heard of a sundial?
Yeah.
Okay. This has nothing to do with the sun. Sundial is for like counting time. But it's as if God turns the dial of the sun and says, okay, you're not going to get to shine for, so many hours of the day. Yeah. So instead of 12 hours, tick, 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 you only get to shine for 8 hours. And he turns the dial, the sundial, back a little bit. So it says here, the third part of the sun was smitten, third part of the moon, third part of the stars, so as the third part of them was darkened, and the day shone not for a third part of it, and the night likewise. So you lose 4 hours in the day, 4 hours in the night, a total of 8 hours of the day. You're sitting in either complete darkness or very dimly lit, right, compared to what it would normally be in that time frame. Just hold this and get Isaiah chapter 30, if you would. Let me show you a time where God will adjust the dial, my juvenile dial of the sun. Isaiah 30, verse 26. I want to show you this so that you see God can adjust the strength, the shining capability of the sun. He can move that dial. Now in the tribulation, when he turns it down for a third part, ever since I've moved to Africa, I can't avoid the joke, right, that God lets ESCOM take control of the sun, moon, and stars. What do our Lord set in forth of the day? It's right there. It's too easy not to go there, right? Isaiah 30, verse 26. Now this is the millennial time. So we're reading about this period over here, this 1,000-year time. Verse 26, moreover, the light of the moon shall be as the light of the sun. And the light of the sun shall be sevenfold. So God cranks it up 7 times the strength. So in the millennium, bring the suntan lotion. It says, as the light of 7 days, in the day that the Lord bindeth up the breach of his people and healeth the stroke of their wound. Right, so when God fixes, brings the Jew back into the kingdom, and there we are with him, nature gets ratcheted up. Right? So remember, we've talked about how there's this regeneration of the earth. Come back to Revelation 8. So God is able to adjust that dial. So I think in the tribulation he turns it down, and then in the millennium he turns it way up. Now chapter 8 and verse 12, among the other problems, and I'm going to ask you to just picture this in your mind. I don't think I'm going to do a very good job of using my vocabulary to explain how bad this time is. You're going to have to think this through in your mind. The waters are turned to blood, the trees are burned up, all the grass has died. Men are falling over from taking a sip of water because it's poisonous. And now everything is dimly lit, dark. You talk about depression.
Yeah.
You talk about sadness. You're going to need some vitamin D supplements. It's going to be rough on people. Right? Listen, what has humanity been causing for 6,000 years? Pain, suffering, depression, injustice, all of this. So God says, listen, if that's what you want, that's what you get. I'm going to turn the earth into a place you deserve. Think about it. This is what you deserve. Wham! This is the answer to the prayer for justice. You reap what you sow. Chapter 8, verse 13. And I beheld and heard an angel flying through the midst of heaven, saying with a loud voice. So remember how I mentioned earlier, there's an interlude. God will sometimes pause, get your attention, and go, okay, Kia, now look what I'm about to do. Right? So there was silence. Watch this. Going to be bad. Now these first four, this was God just warming up. This was God bringing out, he's just throwing a few bowls just to get warmed up. Now he says, okay, I'm bringing out the fast bowler now. you want to see me give you a good bowl? Here it comes. So he says in verse 13, this angel proclaims, woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth. Notice the audience. He's not saying woe to the earth. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth. Why? The first four trumpets were aimed at the earth and the seas. These last three trumpets, they are also referred to as the three woes, and you can see why, because it is directly going to touch humanity. Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth by reason of the other voices of the trumpet of the three angels which are yet to sound. And then I think God does a very fitting thing. He puts an exclamation mark at the end of that. He says, guys, you thought that was bad. I have set the scene for you. I have put you in a context that is befitting of your behavior. Everything around you is completely corrupt, destroyed, rotten. And now I'm coming after you. Cool. So with that, we cheerfully go into chapter 9. Chapter 9's outline, verses 1 to 12, is the first woe. We're talking about the locusts. Now, I just didn't write it out, but these are demonic locusts. All right, these are not natural locusts. And verses 13 to 21, the second woe. And let me clarify, the second woe begins. The second woe doesn't end until all the way here at the second coming of Christ. But that we'll talk about in chapter 11. But I'm going to say that the fifth and sixth trumpet probably start back here, my guess. Okay, maybe it's a little more this side, but it starts back there. But then these things will last for some time. Chapter 9 and verse 1. I didn't mention horses here. Demonic horses we'll read about just now. Chapter 9 and verse 1. And the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth. And to him, now the star is a him. Do you see that? Mm-hmm. Now we already know from chapter 1, we were given some metaphors, if you will. The stars, or let's say allegory, the stars and the candlesticks. Mm-hmm. The candlesticks are the churches. Stars are the angels. You remember back in chapter 1 we talked about in chapter 2 and 3 to the angel of the church of Ephesus, to the angel, and most commentators say, no, the angel is the minister, it's the messenger, it's the pastor of the church. So the angel, they say, is not really an angel, it's the pastor. What about this one? The star is a hymn that comes out. This is an angel that goes down and unlocks the bottomless pit. Are you going to say this is a pastor? Takes the key of the bottomless pit. Get to where. Be consistent, right? If you're going to make those 7 stars, then pastors, what about this one? So this is where Scripture interprets Scripture. All right? So rather than say, well, you know, that's just your opinion, the Bible has an opinion on these things as well. So verse 1 again, I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit. And he opened the bottomless pit. Now, just for some context, we'll see it again in chapter 20. There is an angel that will once again open the bottomless pit and cast Satan into that bottomless pit. Bind him, cast him in, and lock him in there for 1,000 years. Now, in Revelation 20, the bottomless pit is referred to as a prison, Satan's prison. And then if you run the references, 1 Peter chapter 3, Jesus went and preached to the spirits in prison. You compare that with 2 Peter chapter 2, those spirits were in hell. So this tells me something. Hell equals prison equals bottomless pit. All right, so just to draw all that together. Now, when we say bottomless pit, people think, you know, and then you just keep falling forever and ever. It's not like that. If you take a soccer ball, or any ball, not any ball, a rugby ball might be different, but you take a round ball, a soccer ball, what's the bottom of it? There is no bottom to it, right? It's bottomless. So when you think of the earth, right, and then you have hell, Jesus referred to it as the heart of the earth. It's in the middle, it's round in shape, there's no bottom to it. Right? So when we open the bottomless pit, that's what we're talking about. Everywhere you look, there's just, it's not as if you can orient yourself to go, there's the top, there's the bottom side. You can't figure that out. It's just constantly in motion and turmoil. All right, so verse 2, and he opened the bottomless pit, and there arose a smoke out of the pit, as the smoke of a great furnace. And the sun and the air were darkened by reason of the smoke of the pit. Now see, this is a slightly different, or let's say slightly different language is used here compared to chapter 8, when God turns down the power of the sun. This, clearly, there's smoke coming up and darkening the light of the sun coming down. And the air is darkened as well. Now, it's easy to think, let's say the human observation of this would be a volcano erupting, but a massive volcano. If I had to venture a guess, and guys, this is just a massive guess, okay? Please do not think this is a biblical guess. I have no biblical proof for this at all. It wouldn't surprise me if this angel goes to the Bermuda Triangle, and that's where he opens the pit. Just a guess. You guys can do that whenever you want. Don't go home and start, ooh, Bermuda in the Bible. But yeah, anyway, just maybe. Because, you know, wouldn't that fit? The world would just go nuts. Here comes all this nasty stuff coming out of the Bermuda Triangle, you know. I don't know how much you know about that place, but it certainly has a few question marks that go with it. All right, but anyway, let's keep going here with something biblical. Verse 3, and there came out of the smoke locusts upon the earth, and unto them was given power, as the scorpions of the earth have power. All right, so what kind of power do the scorpions of the earth have? Well, they have power to strike fear into the hearts of men, and to strike pain into the bodies of men. I don't know about you, but when I see a scorpion, I don't want to play with it. I generally want to kill it or run, one or the other, because those scorpions are, man, they're some nasty little things. So now these that are coming up, these locusts, they are given authority or power as scorpions. Now you're going to see why. It's a locust, right? Yeah. But it has the tail of a scorpion, and with it, it can sting and hurt and cause pain way beyond a natural scorpion or a natural, you know, locust really can't cause pain in that way, but we'll see more about this in a moment. Verse 4, and it was commanded them that they should not hurt the grass of the earth, neither any green thing. Now think about that. Don't hurt any grass or any green thing. All the trees and grass, you know, a third of the trees and all the grass died. But now, the command, don't hurt the grass. So obviously some time has gone by, and some grass has grown again, right? And there are some green leaves on the trees, and they are commanded, don't bother those things. Right? I've already judged those things, and it's bounced back from it. He says, neither any tree, but only those men which have not the seal of God in their foreheads. So these demonic locusts that come up out of the bottomless pit, you are here to hurt men, not nature. So concentrate on them, and the only people that are protected are the 144,000. Now, I've read a handful of commentators that say any believer, right? Now, obviously, we've been raptured up by this time, so we are not going to see this from an earthly perspective. Thank God. I'd much rather see this by faith and not by sight. But we're up in heaven. But remember, there will be people that will convert after the rapture. The 144,000 sealed right about here. And then they're converts, right? They have to endure to the end and all of that. People will say that the converts, the people that get saved by listening to the 144,000, they also get protected. I don't know. I don't know of any verse that supports that idea. I only read about the 144,000 receiving the seal in their foreheads. I read nothing where their converts get sealed. Now you say, but that, why would God allow His own people, His own followers, to go through that kind of pain, these demonic locusts and whatnot? Because they had a chance back here to receive Christ. They could have avoided all of this.
Yeah.
Hey man, you want to wait? That's not on God. If you rejected truth back then and now you've waited till this point to do it, then God's under no obligation to show you a special favor. Now God could. I mean, God could be merciful, and I'm sure they'll be praying, saying, God, please keep those locusts away. So I believe God could answer such a prayer. But I don't see anywhere where it's promised that a general believer, if I can say it like that, not the 144,000, I don't see any promise for them. I think they could be affected by this. Verse 5, and to them it was given, speaking about the locusts, to them it was given that they should not kill them. They're not going to kill mankind, but that they should be tormented 5 months. So the them that are not going to be killed, they will be tormented. And I must admit, I have a bit of a question mark here. The way I've always gone about this is that when they get stung by this locust, they have pain for 5 months. Now that, I think, is clear in the passage. But I wonder if there's something more to this. I wonder if the locusts that have come out of the bottomless pit, if they don't move about on the earth for 5 months. Now, just as we read, maybe just food for thought, as I was studying for this, I got to thinking about that. Maybe there's room in the chapter to understand it that way as well. But I believe it's fairly certain that when a man gets hit, he's going to suffer for 5 months. I believe that's fairly certain. But in any event, let's keep reading here. But that they should be tormented 5 months. And their torment was as the torment of a scorpion when he striketh the man. So the torment is not that they're flying around for 5 months scaring people, but when they sting a man, they hurt for 5 months. That's why I say definitely I understand it that way. But there might be room to think also that they have a 5-month lifespan, which, coincidentally, if I understand the lifespan of a locust, it's about 5 months. So maybe there's a connection there. All right, so I just out of curiosity, I've never been stung by a scorpion because I run. Right? I don't go near. There's a great way not to get hurt by things, just don't go near them. Right? So, yeah. But I was curious, what does an earthly scorpion sting do? 10 different side effects of their sting. Let me read them for you quickly. Breathing difficulties, muscle thrashing and twitching, unusual movements of the neck, head, and eyes, dribbling or drooling, sweating, nausea, vomiting, high blood pressure, so your heart beating out of your chest, accelerated heart rate or irregular heartbeat, restlessness, excitability, or inconsolable crying. So you just pretty much curl up in the fetal position and go, that's if an earthly one hits you. That's an earthly one. Now the worst ones will kill you, right? There are different levels to the scorpions we know about. But look, verse 6. In those days shall men seek death, and shall not find it, and shall desire to die, and death shall flee from them. Please, Mr. Grim Reaper, hit me with your sickle and take me out. And the Grim Reaper just says, no, I can't. You're on your own in this one. Now, understand this properly. Do you remember this guy named Phil Kidd? Do you remember that name?
Yeah. Yeah.
He came through Pensacola while we were in school. I don't know, did you ever go hear him preach?
I think so.
He went to Smyrna Baptist Church once, and a few of us in Bible school, we were just curious. He's kind of an oddball, but he believes the Bible, but kind of in a strange way. Very fiery preacher. really gets worked up, foaming at the mouth kind of guy. We went to hear him preach. It's the only time I've heard him in person, and he preached out of this chapter. And he was preaching about the tribulation. And he got to this verse, and he said, now, people in the tribulation, they're going to be walking around with chainsaws in their head. And they won't die. And I thought, there was a row of us PBI guys looking at each other going, what? He says, you can hit them with an axe, and they won't die. And this was the zombie apocalypse, right? That is not what verse 6 is talking about. Verse 6 is simply saying that they would like for this scorpion sting to kill them. They would rather die quickly than suffer for 5 months. That's all that it's saying. This is not ruling out suicide attempts and things like that. Okay, please understand that. It's just focusing on how bad that pain is. All right, so verse 7. Now we get this description. And what a description. And the shapes of the locust were like unto horses prepared unto battle. The locust, so the body of the locust is the shape of a horse. Now you've probably seen a locust. It just looks like an oval. It's just a little cigar tube. It's not much to it, but this has the body of a horse. Very strong. A horse's frame, is a very strong body. Not the size of a horse. Okay, the shape. Don't think it's a horse-sized locust. That's wow. That would be. The shape of the locust were like unto horses prepared unto battle, and on their heads were as it were crowns like gold, and their faces were as the faces of men. Now, all I can tell you to do is picture that in your mind. Right? Dr. Ruckman, I try to bring you the book next week. I have it on my shelf at home. Dr. Ruckman, he was an artist, right? Professional artist. He did oil paintings for every verse that pertains to the second coming of Christ. So the entire book of Revelation, he painted a picture that goes with it. So he painted pictures of what these things look like based on this biblical description. And it's an obvious, I mean, you don't need me to say it. It's a hideous creature.
It is.
The body of a horse, the shape there, crown of gold, probably naturally growing up out of it. I'm not going to, maybe it's something that it wears, and then faces like men. Oh my goodness, that's bad enough. It gets worse. Verse 8, and they had hair as the hair of women. Now, when you read that, right, it's not like they had a perm. Hair like women is what? Long hair. Long hair. I don't know how many times I've taken a guy, right, that has long hair and go, hey, see there? Are you trying to be a demonic locust? Now, this is a young man who's trying to look like a woman, right? That's what we're getting at there. But in any event, they had hair as the hair of women, and their teeth were as the teeth of lions. So the face of a man, hair like a woman, golden crown, body of a horse. They need a dentist. This is, wow. Teeth like lions. And then verse 9, and they had breastplates, as it were breastplates of iron. So when it said horses prepared unto battle, right, there you go. They're covered with this protective covering so that if you try to shoot one of them out of the sky or try to swat it, it's not going to work. So you can't just, doom. You can't be, dooms. No, not with these guys. And the sound of their wings was as the sound of chariots of many horses running to battle. So again, the language the Bible uses here paints the picture in your mind. And you can imagine the sound. I mean, it's just ferocious as they come towards you. It would intimidate you greatly. Now, many people, I've heard them come to verse 9 and they say, you see, this isn't really a locust. This is a helicopter. To verse 9, because it's made of iron and the sound of the wings was boom, 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 boom. And see, that's a helicopter. I've never seen a helicopter with the hair of a woman. Or with teeth like a lion, right? So, I mean, verse 9 might work for that, but none of the other verses will work for that. Now, just to give you guys an idea of how other commentators handle this, I'm going to read you a Reformed, he was a Baptist, his name is John Gill, back in the 1700s, but he was a Calvinistic Baptist, right? A Reformed Baptist. Here is his explanation for what we've just read. I believe that what we just read is what it means. Yeah. There it is. That's what they look like. Full stop. He says this, When it says up in verse 7, prepared unto battle, here's his explanation. This part of their description may denote the wars of the Saracens, which is Islam. Back in the 7th and 8th century, we've been studying this in church history.
Yeah.
The wars of Islam and the aridity, force, and power with which they overran a great part of the empire. So he says, what you're reading here, this isn't really a locust. These are Muslims. Muslims? Did they run around wearing crowns of gold? That's a strange hair like I don't teeth like mine? Maybe. Then he flips and says, and as it may be applied to the western locust. Now the eastern locust, remember the Eastern Roman Empire, you had Constantine, all that in the East, Constantinople. You had the Muslims doing some work over there in Arabia. And then in the West, so he calls them western locust, he's talking about the Roman Catholic Church. So he says it applies to Muslims on this side, and then on this side you could read it as the Catholics. He says, as it may be applied to the western locust, the disputes, contentions, quarrels raised by the Romish clergy. So prepared to battle, the Roman bishops yelling at each other. I mean, it's just not there. But that's when you don't believe what it says, you have to come up with something. When it says crowns like gold, he says, this may design the several victories and conquests which the Saracens obtained in Arabia, Persia, Syria, Egypt, Africa, Spain, many other places. And supposing this to have any reference to the western locust, it may respect the triple crown of the head on the caps of the cardinals. So if you've ever seen, like the Pope has that tall cap, he says it's a triple crown. There's actually 3 crowns piled up there. He says, so that's the hat the Pope wears. I don't like the hat the Pope wears, but come on. He even goes to say the shaven pates, a pate, P-A-T-E is the head, right at the top of your head, the shaven pates of the priest in the form of crowns. Have you ever seen these friars that would shave their heads and just leave the hair circling around? He says that's the crown that you're reading about. Oh. Crowns like gold? Maybe they had blonde hair. When we read about the faces of men, he says this which may be expressive of the affable carriage of Muhammad. So the faces of men, that's Muhammad that you're reading about. And his followers, especially to the Christians, and of his great pretensions to holiness and religion, and of the plausible and insinuating ways and artful methods used by him to gain upon men. So he says the faces of men, this is Muhammad just looking like a nice guy, a good-looking guy, and the Christians appeal. You know, they're drawn to his beauty. If you've read Islamic literature, Muhammad was not a good-looking man. He was actually white with red hair. If you read their literature. That's why so many Muslims dye their hair red. That's another story altogether. But in any event, he goes on to say, and being applied to the clergy of the Church of Rome, it may denote their show of humanity and their pretended great concern for the welfare of the souls of men, their flatteries, good words, and fair speeches, with which they deceive the simple and unwary. Now, I've just read you that. I'm not going to go into debunking all of that. To show you, when you don't believe what it says, you start looking and grabbing for anything to try to make sense of it. And the Bible is not as difficult as people make it. Right? How many people you know have read Revelation and go, I just don't get it. But if you believe what it says, granted, with my natural observation, this is weird. But I don't expect. When I read about a spiritual demonic creature coming out of the bottomless pit, I don't expect to look on earth and find its equal. I expect to see something strange. Right? So we're going to stop there for tonight. When we get back into it, we'll pick it up in verse 10. We'll talk more about their hurting men and the king over them and so forth. Not too bad for one night's work. Anybody have any questions about what we've covered? Yes, ma'am.
When you look at chapter 8, it starts with, and I saw. Okay? Now, he saw things were going to happen in the future.
Yes.
Now, if I tried to explain to my great-grandmother what a cell phone was,
correct,
I wouldn't even begin to know how to describe to her what things look like today.
That's right.
So this can also be the way he saw things, which might be, say, future airplanes or future whatever they're going to be.
Could be.
That's going to look like that because he had no way to act. I mean,
To describe it.
it's impossible
You're
if you look in
absolutely
those
right.
days to describe what's happening on the earth now. It's just, you can't describe to people technology today.
Yeah, TV, cell phones, things like that.
It's
No,
impossible.
you're absolutely right. And I do think that plays into Revelation on occasion. Like with this great mountain burning with fire, he wouldn't have known the word meteorite. You know?
Yes.
The star falling, probably a comet, something like that.
Yes.
When we get to things like chapter 9, we're
Yes.
reading about these demonic locusts and horses because these are spiritual entities.
Yes.
I do not think that John is seeing, well, let's just say what they do, the way they affect mankind. I don't know of anything on earth yet that would meet this description.
Yeah.
So until I see this thing and go, oh, that's what John was describing,
Yeah.
I can simply say that he is seeing a spiritual creature
Yes.
that is just monstrous.
Yes.
And next week, when we get into the demonic horses, they have the body of a horse, the face, the head of a lion, the tail is a serpent. I mean, these are several creatures put together, but I'm going to show you some verses in the Old Testament where even back there, spiritual creatures, you have half man, half goat. I mean, you know, we'll talk about how in the spiritual world you can get some strange mixes. But yeah, in Revelation, I do think John sees some things that are futuristic, and he doesn't know, there's no word that would explain it at the time, so he, just by human observation, says, looks like a big mountain that's on fire. Yeah, in chapter 12, you read about Israel flying on the wings of an eagle. Very likely that's an airplane, but we'll talk more about that.
Like the blood, the sea that turns to blood.
Yeah.
It's been shown now with the earth warming up. There's a red plankton that grows in the sea, and it makes it completely red. It looks like, absolutely, it looks like blood. I've seen photographs of it.
Yeah.
That looks like blood, you know. So, but this doesn't say like blood.
Yeah.
It actually says the
It
word
becomes blood.
blood.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's why I'm hesitant to say it just looks like it. It says it becomes blood. Right, yes ma'am?
Revelation 8 verse 7, where it says that the third part of the trees and all the green grass.
Yes.
It doesn't say herbs, but I'm assuming that the herbs will also be burned.
I think that's a safe assumption, right?
So there's not going to be food either in that time.
For a short period of time, the animals are really going to struggle, right? Humanity might have stored some grain up or food up, but I think this links directly with what we had in the fourth seal, where a fourth of mankind dies because part of it is the animals attacking people. I think this is part of it. I think this explains why the animals are going so crazy, because remember they kind of they're tied to nature, the trees and the grass and the pollen and all. They're drawn to that. If there's nothing to draw them to that, what do? Everything just gets thrown out of whack. So yeah, that's going to be bad. Right, anything else? Yes, sir?
Whenever there's smoke, something is burning.
Yeah.
In chapter 9, verse 2, when the smoke coming out of the bottomless pit, what's burning there?
What's burning? I think that it's coming from within in hell. I think you're having the fire of hell down there. And then when that's opened up, the smoke of that pit is what you're getting. The smoke of a great furnace. Up it comes. Yeah. I think down there is actual, literal, real fire. That's what we read about in Luke 16. Now, I am tormented in this flame, the rich man says. All right, anything else? All said and done? Okay. We'll have a word of prayer and let you guys head to the house. Let's see here. Boyce, you mind closing this in prayer? All right.
Heavenly Father, I just want to come to you today, Lord, and just want to thank you for all the preaching and all the teaching, Lord. And thank you, Lord, that you provided us with the Bible.
Yeah.
And Lord,